Welcome back to A Fine Time for Healing, a place where your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being are all that matter. So put your feet up, relax, and enjoy today's show. Today we have with us Stephen Joseph, who is a first-generation American, son of a Holocaust survivor, a masterful attorney, seasoned negotiator, engaging speaker, and award-winning author. And indefatigable marathon runner. Stephen doesn't claim to know it all, but he has certainly mastered one thing: the art of effective crankiness. And so we're going to talk today about his latest book, Cranky Superpowers: Life Lessons Learned from the Common Crankatsuris Chronicles. There it is. Okay. Welcome, Stephen.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Why did you focus on crankiness?
Well, it was all by accident, and I guess I do get cranky. So I came out with my first book. It's the last surviving dinosaur, the TyrantoCrankaTsuris, and Tsuris is the Yiddish word for problems. So in that book, there's all these family members who complain about their tsuris, and I talk about like how growing up in the Bronx where I grew up, it was like the tsuris Olympics. Like, you think you have tsuris? If I had tsuris doing cartwheels, no one could outdo my tsuris. And the story is about the smallest dinosaur, but the most dangerous dinosaur on the planet, the TyrantoCrankaTsuris, who kept cranking out her tsuris till all the other dinosaurs basically dropped dead, except for the TyrantoCrankaTsuris. and then many thousands of years later, humans evolved from these two dinosaurs, which explains when we're born, we come out cranky. And I wasn't planning to do anything more, but I started a blog. After some reviewer said I didn't talk enough about overcoming crankiness, and I thought the point was about embracing our crankiness. So I started writing more and more and more, and then I have my first book, A Grownup Guide to Effective Crankiness, the Crankatsuris Method, and then there was more to write, and I came out with Cranky Superpowers: Life Lessons Learned from the Common Crankatsuris Chronicles. So
and you mentioned the Crankatsuris, and just for those of people who don't know Yiddish, kvetch is complain.
That's right.
And you've got the complainer, and then you've got the cranky.
Yes.
My source is worse than yours.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Oh gosh. Okay. So the title of your book is that this is a superpower. How is crankiness a superpower?
Well, actually, I would start telling story. I've been asked this question, and I thought about it more, and I would always get into stories. But in my book, there's two things I talk about. I tell a story about this rabbi, true story, in class. He was asking what we want to get out of life, and kids answered pleasure. He goes, right, we want pleasure. And then it goes, what is the opposite of pleasure? And kids said pain. And he said, no, the opposite of pleasure is comfort. And he said, well, if it's just comfortable, just stay in bed all day. You don't ever do anything. It's just stay comfortable. So in the other piece, in the prologue, my first wife, she had ALS, and she passed away a couple years ago. So I dedicated the book to her, and she passed away around Passover, which tells the story about the Jewish people leaving Egypt and being freed from slavery. And I mentioned, I actually did a eulogy for her, and I said what she was about, and she grew up with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and she wasn't about freedom from, it was always about freedom to. And there's a big difference. Like, you're freed from slavery, but you're lost in the desert for 40 years. So being lost in the desert is not necessarily what freedom is about. It's freedom too. And I think putting those two things together, that's all about what Cranky Superpowers is all about, where you're overcoming obstacles and you find what you could get from that. And I've had some things in my life that I had to get knocked down, but then just get back up, and it's amazing. Like things I wouldn't like, even these books. I never had it in my head to write these books, and I'm coming out my fourth kids book next month. So it's fun. It's fun that that I get to do this. But again, it didn't come from like just lying in bed. It's getting up and doing things.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your first wife. My sister died of ALS as well.
Yeah, it's a horrible
It's
disease.
horrible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrible. How old was she when she passed?
She was about 61.
Sorry about that.
That's the
61. Well, so sorry.
yeah.
So when we think of being cranky, we think of that as kind of a negative thing. If we're cranky, we're in a bad mood, we're annoyed, whatever it is. Is the Crankasaurus like that?
It's like that, but the thing is, I talk about the common Crankatsuris, and sometimes when you're cranky and it's you put it all on yourself, like I'm feeling it's about me, and I compare it to the common cold, where you might have one or two a year, but a common Crankatsuris you could have two or three in the morning alone. And by making it like, hey, this is common, this is something everybody has, you kind of like, wipe it off. Yes, it's annoying, yes, like, but it's not just about you. It's about life, that we have to be a little more resilient and not just get knocked down and that's it. I'm going to turn around and head home every time something bad happens.
So are we supposed to, in this way of thinking, are we supposed to embrace our crankiness, or are we supposed to move past it?
We're supposed to let it breathe. Like my first book, I gave like giving space for people to kids, grown-ups, have time to be cranky, and noticing it. And sometimes you're allowed to, like, it's almost like theater, do cranky improv, and sometimes you just need to be by yourself, but noticing it. In my grown-up guide, I talk about the Crankatsuris doctor, where I'm in a relationship with somebody else, and I could see that person is being cranky. I have a chapter called Crankatsuris Kryptonite, where we all have our kryptonite. And I know that, yeah, Superman is still super, but yeah, he has that kryptonite issue. I'm not going to say, you know what, I need another superhero. I don't like this kryptonite stuff. And in Cranky Superpowers, I have a chapter called Crankatsuris Menopause. And I talk about, in my relation, my wife, I said, we have a rule where you get to be 5% insane, 20% crazy, but you have to be 75% normal. And then you start doing the math and say, wait a second. That's like over 70, that's 73 days a year crazy. I don't know if I could handle that. And it's counterintuitive, because if I told you, Randy, that you're allowed 0% crazy, when you do become crazy, because we all become, you can't say that you're crazy. You could say, I'm not the one who's crazy. You're the one who's really crazy. And because I don't like being called crazy by a crazy person, I go a little crazy myself. And then we have this big crazy fight. And then we end up being insane. So by giving you permission to be a little crazy, you feel there's gratitude. Wow, I could stop. I'm like, I don't lose points for that. It's like, yeah, she has like 18%. And I'm not going to get overreactive to, she's just using up like 2%, no big deal. So by giving permission to be crazy, you end up using maybe 1% crazy a year. If you were given 0%, you might end up 50, 60% crazy. And that's not really good. So, those are like things that I talk about.
So for me, crankiness is not invited into my home. So, I think that for the peace of the serenity of the home, that people have to work out their own stuff before they bring it into us. And that's just because I had a very cranky childhood. I had cranky parents and cranky siblings, and I had constant chaos. And so I don't invite that into my home, and I'm really careful with who I invite into my personal space as well, because, so what about wanting to be more on the positive side than embracing this kind of vulnerability that we have?
Well, it is about positive. So I talk about that. I the thing about, you said going into the home, like I'll go into your house and might say, Steve, take off your shoes. I just bought this rug. I paid $20 for this rug. I don't want to get the rug dirty. And I grew up in the cranky household, like just like you, very. And the thing is, whatever was in my father's head went straight to his mouth. There was no filter, sort of thing. And my mother was kind of like the same way. So I make that, like, we're so careful not to get that rug dirty, but it happens that we put the dirt on each other, like people we love, people we care about. Mm-hmm. We're not so mindful to take off the shoes. So about like effective crankiness, I can't just cut it out. I can't just take that part out of me. I have to accept it, and just notice it and slow it down and say, yeah, this, like, I had a bad day. I need to express it. I need to be heard. I'm an attorney by day, and I teach negotiation. I negotiate, and the thing about, and then being married to therapists for like 30 years, that combination, giving people the experience of being heard, this very powerful thing, and giving people permission to, when they want to express something, even like, not so good, they appreciate that. Or they need space to be like just left alone, it's appreciated. Right. So it's a mindful, yes, we're not trying to say, like, deny what we're feeling. We're accepting it and embracing it. I talk about with kids, where like you hear parents all the time, don't use your words, so don't act out, use your words. So but even there, where let's say there's like little Johnny says, I'm angry, I'm feeling angry. And then after a while, you think that, oh, Johnny's really good at saying how he feels, but Johnny must be a really angry kid. I by calling it a common Crankatsuris, little Johnny's a sweet kid who happens to have some the common Crankatsuris. It's not anything like, oh my God, like, oh, he has to go to the doctor. It's just like, it happens, and not get all like famished about all of that. It's just like, again, giving space, allowing that, not just like making believe it doesn't exist.
Right.
Uh,
And so, we can claim that about ourselves. And I kind of can relate, on days when I'm just not all there, when I'm just kind of in a mood, I'll say
mhm.
to my husband, yeah, I'm in a really funky mood. Or I might say to my, girlfriend or something like that, ugh, what a day, and then we laugh about it. We laugh about it and say, yeah, me too, it's really been a weird day. And then we talk about it and everything, and then we move on. So is that kind of what you're saying?
Uh, that's kind of what I'm saying. And but the thing about my book, it goes far beyond just my first book probably had more about relationships. The second book, Cranky Superpowers, has also stuff about finding your own superpower through these moments and times. And I retell stories like I've Cinderella Crankatsuris. And in that story, well, the prince was dating Snow White. And do you know that Snow White was living with seven little men? Which the prince had it's kind of weird. And and they kind of had spats. He would call them dwarves. They're not dwarves. They're seven cute little men. And then she comes out with a movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Can you believe that? After all that fighting. So he's had this online thing with Cinderella, and the thing about Cinderella is that she doesn't get the beautiful dress and the carriage with the horses and the carriage people. She got a megaphone, so she through that cranky moment she found her voice. I redo the uh, Wizard of Oz, and the lion gets to eat the wizard. So which like that chapter is called spinning my wheel, Crankatsuris. So the wizard, hey, I have a watch for you. It's just like, look, a clock. It's at the heart. Oh, here's a piece of paper. Here's your. So it's like they're getting frustrated. You're spinning my wheel, and finally, the lion gets the lion. His brother said he had to grow a pair, and so what you have to grow a coney, whatever. I don't know what,
Kahuna's,
but
right, Kahuna's, yeah.
yes, yes. So finally, he eats the wizard, and everyone says, "Look, Lion, you grew a pair," and everyone's yelling "cojones," and he goes, ain't it the truth?" And so again, that cranky moment, he found his
That's very
brain.
fun. Superpower. It,
His
right,
super, yes,
right. It empowered him to make a
yeah,
powerful move, to make a move towards
yeah.
a major change.
Yes, that's what it is. And even I retell the story, like next month is Passover. So I retell the story of the Israelites who were slaves in Egypt. They went to went to the land of, they got a brochure that tired of winter in Egypt. How about the land of milk and honey in the spring? But there was a disclaimer on the brochure. Please be forewarned, while we hope for the best, we will only have prepared for the worst. So every
Mhm.
moment of the time, so they get to the Red Sea. Like, where's the cruise ship? I know your great grandson, uncle Noah. I heard he had a cruise ship with a zoo on it. It's like, no cruise ship. And then, like, do you have a map? No map. And while we hope for the best, we only prepared for the worst. So they went 40 years in the desert, and one of the only foods they had was borscht. And they finally figured out if they dripped the borscht, because they're going around in circles for 40 years, but if they dripped the borscht, where they were, they know that, oh, we won't have to go around circles. And that's how they got to the land of milk and honey. And that line in the sand, by the way, became famously known as the Borscht Belt. So, so, but and it's like, not hope for the best, preparing for the best, and that actually, uh, I manage lawyers. I always say, we hope for this, we hope for that, we hope for this, we hope for this, and it's like, how do we prepare so that, again, like, if you're hoping and not doing, you'll end up maybe a little cranky. But if you prepare for the best, you might have a better outcome.
Um, Now, does everybody have this Crankosaurus within them, do you think?
Uh, yes, I do think I do think everybody has a little Crankatsuris in it. That just I mean that's we're living in an imperfect world, so things don't line up exactly the way we like every day. There's nothing like everything goes according to plan. And a lot of people don't even have a plan. So how does it go according to plan when you didn't have a plan in the first place? So yes, so you don't have a plan and it doesn't go according to the plan that you didn't have, you might get a little cranky.
How much crankiness should we tolerate from others? And let me just preface this question with what I do.
Uh,
So I'm a narcissistic abuse expert and coach. So everyone that I work with has dealt with the ultimate crankiness, moods, anger, constantly being thrown at them, thrown at them, um, to the point where they just can't even take it anymore. I mean, and it becomes all about them. Then they start beating themselves up and they lose their self-esteem and all of this kind of thing, right?
mm.
So if somebody is extraordinarily cranky, are we expected to tolerate that?
I would say no. I would. I mean, again, my first book was about effective crankiness. So what I hear you describe is ineffective crankiness. So should we tolerate ineffective crankiness? No, we shouldn't tolerate. No, we should. But there's a way to be cranky that's positive, that where you're giving permission, but you're not giving like, okay, we're not going to be next hours. You have permission for next six hours to go off, and that it's not about that. Uh, even with like I talked before about like, okay, you get 5% insane. Yeah, that's it. But you have to be 75% normal. And the point is to use by giving you permission that hopefully use less than that 5%, less than the 20% crazy, uh, because you appreciate the permission. Uh, and again, it's that what you're describing is ineffective crankiness, and that's why partly why I wrote the book, and I do uh, negotiation where you have a lot of cranky people, where uh, they just want to vent, they want to, and sometimes uh, the power of just being heard is just like that they were actually heard, and that kind of is their medicine. Like I actually uh, had a negotiation, a mediation once where uh, it was not a good case, but this person felt that they were entitled to lots of money and they wanted millions of dollars. And because they wanted so much, I would have been willing to offer something, but I said, we have to offer zero. And this woman came up to me afterwards and she said, thank you so much for listening to my story. And she wasn't upset that, no, I didn't, she wasn't upset. I didn't give her $1 million, but she was just so grateful that she was heard.
Mm-hmm.
So, so sometimes it's just giving the person the ability to speak, to be heard.
Right.
And in the course, if you have a cranky person who gets frustrated, they're not being heard. Sometimes that they end up talking louder, and
Oh
there's
yeah. Sometimes I work with couples separately, the husband and the wife, and I always tell the men, even if you don't have the time, just pretend you're listening. Just say, I hear you, I get it. I'm really busy at work right now, but let's talk about this later. But because if you don't acknowledge what the woman is saying, she's just going to get more and more worked up. So
yeah.
yeah, so you just say,
tell
Uh,
you from
I hear
my
you. I hear
yeah,
you.
I hear you. And not only that, again, being married to therapists, but in my first relationship, uh, we started dating, and of course we were in love with each other. And then finally, at some point, she goes, you're not paying attention." And then I said, "No, I did," and I repeated back exactly what she said. "See, I was paying attention." She goes to me, "No, you're recording what I'm saying, but you're not. It's not active listening. It's not like, oh, really? That's so interesting. Like,
Right.
oh,
Hmm.
about this? What about that?" And asking questions and being curious. And that is what again, if somebody is expressing something, that you show that they were heard, but being heard in an active way.
Right. Yeah, I was just in my book, this is my book, Close Encounters of the Worst Kind, but in the last chapter of my book, it's for people who are with they're living with survivors, and I use um, Marsha Linen um, wrote these different levels of validation. Accurate reflection, listening and observing, being present, articulating the unverbalized, known as guessing or mind reading, validating in terms of sufficient, but not necessarily valid causes, also known as validating by history, validating as reasonable in the moment, also known as normalizing, treating the person as valid, also known as radical genuineness. So yeah, she's taken it apart, and this active listening thing,
Yes.
because what happens is when people are going through this kind of abuse and they bring it to their friends or their spouse, someone who has not experienced it themselves, the typical comment is, "Get over it. This has been going on long enough. You can see who that person is." You know, when the abused, let's call them the survivor, um, that's not what they need. They need to be
Yeah.
heard, you know?
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. I really do get what you're saying. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is this kind of reminds me of the the oyster and the pearl. So without that sand, that grit to aggravate and annoy that oyster, it would not produce the pearl.
That's very good. I like
There it
that.
is.
Yes.
So I get it. My daughter, when she went away to college, I mean, she's much older now, but she would call me in the beginning and she would just complain, and of course I wanted to solve it. And she'd say, "No, no, no, Mom,
Mhm.
I just want to vent." And I learned right away, she's just calling to vent. She needs to get it off of her. So,
That's so important. Yeah. No, I uh like I remember one of the first, I guess, self-help books I read. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus,
yep.
and the people just want to fix things. Just hear a problem. Uh, and actually, that's more a man thing. My
Hmm.
more fix. I just want to complain. I don't need solutions right now. Yeah,
Right.
it's frustrating
Hmm.
uh, when I just like there's nothing to be done, especially when there is no solution. That, well, why don't you do? And they don't know all the little details. Like if I have a bad day at work,
Hmm.
they don't. They have to like get my job and live through it to really understand all the little details. There's no way that person has the ability to even suggest how to fix it. So, but they do it anyway. So if your daughter is complaining about school, it's such a personal experience that you would have to actually be like connected to her by the hip, going through
Hmm.
experiencing exactly what she experienced, And then he could share about the frustration. Okay, that's fine, but there's no way to fix it. I mean, there might be an invitation. Well, what do you think? What do you think I should do? Well, then, okay, they are asking for advice. And then
Mm-hmm.
could say, well, you know what I think? I think that whatever.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So
Mhm.
questions are a really good way to approach that.
Yes,
Asking
yes.
questions rather than giving advice. But I know, I mean, I've been married to my husband for over 35 years, and he still feels the need to fix things. And sometimes, so I get these really strange kind of symptoms and disorders. It's all kind of related to my childhood. And when I'm going through it, he's always trying to figure out what is causing it. So you ate those nuts, and then you started with this problem, or you talked to this person, and then you started with this problem, and he's trying so hard to figure it out when in fact it has nothing to do with anything. So
It
but I
doesn't put the nuts. I thought it was the
right, it was
nuts.
the nuts. So and I've given him the literature to say, listen, this isn't based on anything. So um but I can see now, since he's learned that he can't fix it, I can see the frustration. Like, he doesn't know what to do with what I'm saying or what I'm going through because he can't fix it. So he doesn't know what to do with that. And I think that's pretty typical with men.
Um, yes, sometimes, yeah.
Hmm.
It, but I've learned, yeah, every,
I
you
hear
know.
you, honey, is really all you need to say. Oh my gosh. Um, so you have any other stories, little stories from your book that you want to tell us?
Oh, so there's lots lots of fun stories. I do Star Trek, uh, where Mr. Spock is interviewing for first officer with Captain Kirk, and in that story, Captain Kirk asks, "Well, can you give me your word that you will be loyal and trustworthy and all that?" And Mr. Spock says, "I can't give you my word, and I will be probably the most loyal and trustworthy person you have, but uh, I can't give you my word." And of course, Captain Kirk says, "I've interviewed dozens of people, and everybody says they could give me their word. This is highly illogical." And Mr. Spock, he explains that on his planet, uh, there was a leader who said, like, we will we'll invade the Romulans because they look like Vulcans. They're like Vulcans anyway,
Mhm.
and we'll be greeted as liberators. And he said, "I give you my word." In the war kept going on and on and on, and finally, when he gave all his words. If you can imagine, if you give all your words away, at some point you have no words left, and all of a sudden he couldn't communicate. So they learned, and then there was other Vulcans who mimicked the great leader, and they also lost the ability to communicate because they gave all their words. So they made a law that, especially if you're a politician, that you have to keep your word. It's against the law to give your word. You can only keep your word, and if you gave your word, it's punishable by death. So
Wow.
that, yes, it's you have to. So again, there's lesson about keep the value of keeping your word. Uh, even though that, like, there was like a little cranky moment there, but trying to tell stories that like stay with people. So that's one example. I talk about being an attorney first, like, and I started the book how we all get on everybody's nerves, and I start out like saying, like, we always have these phrases, you have a lot of nerve, for whatever, and it's like, you know what, you have some nerve, and then sometimes like, what's your problem? you don't have any nerve, and that gets on my nerves, and then even if I told you that you have no nerves, even though you're completely nerveless, that probably gets on your nerves too, and you get a little cranky.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of fun with that. I talk about like law school, and I say the first year of this is why I get cranky. First year of law school, they teach people how to get on people's nerves. The second year of law school, we learn how to rub people the wrong way. By third year of law school, we learn how to get underneath people's skin. And when you could do all three at exactly the same time, you become a lawyer.
That's so
So,
true. Oh
so,
my gosh, that's so true.
so that's why like that's why I get um, because yeah, I surround myself with these kind of people. Not that I don't do it myself, it's just of course not. But there are people. It's just they graduated top. They were on law review. They're very good. So
What kind of attorney are you?
uh, I work in house for an insurance company. I manage everything from schools, public officials, lawyers, accountants, directors, and officers, all
Wow.
sorts of things. So we get counsel, and then I manage attorneys around the country. Before COVID, I would be always on a plane flying into somewhere to negotiate. Now it's like everything is Zoom, which sometimes is okay. It's good, but I miss the
Travel.
going room and shell diplomacy and pulling people here and there, that sort of thing. Even though I could still do it in sort of way, uh, by phone or by Zoom.
Mhm.
Uh, that's what I do. I negotiate. I end up negotiating, and it's a lot of fun. Where and this where I'm thinking about cranky superpowers or effective crankiness, uh, where like in negotiation, like I'll make some move, and I know what's going to be response. I know like and I'm thinking. I always say it's like I used to play. My parents, my father actually, would since I was a little boy would want us to play backgammon all the time, and with backgammon, you're throwing the dice, but I already know my whatever my role will be. I know the next 20 moves, and I treat negotiation like that.
Hmm.
So again, it's like how like it's very predictable, like so how people get to be in a negotiation, which is very satisfying, where you just know, yeah, if I do this, then they're gonna respond in a certain way. And that 95% of the time I'm right. So which is
Yep, you got a lot of experience at that, so you kind of know the formula. Uh,
yes,
yeah, I
definitely
mean,
formulas.
my husband and I owned two massage envies for several years, and so we dealt with the public. And when you have a business where you're dealing with the public, you do have some insane people come in there and just want to. They're angry, and this is where they're this is where they're going to unleash. And sometimes they unleash in such a disgusting way that we end up having to call the police to get them out because they're unreasonable. Um, is that crankiness or is that anger on their part?
Uh, well, I think it's probably both. If you're angry and it comes out, you're expressing your anger, uh, and I think it starts out as anger. Well, it could be like anger, and then you're not heard, and you get more angry,
Mhm.
not heard, and you get more angry, and so there's a combination of crankiness, like the frustration of not being heard. Uh,
Or
so
not getting your way is
not getting
really not getting your way.
yes, not getting your way, uh, yeah, so that gets into that boils over. Yeah, uh, so yes, yeah, it definitely shows up, and again, I deal with cranky people and angry people on the other side, and they have this attorney, and then there's a mediator. So there's a person that's doing the shuttle diplomacy, and again, sometimes there's messages depending on the kind of case. There could be a case where, hey, like, our folks messed up, and we have to acknowledge that. Uh, and then sometimes where even if we didn't mess up, but somebody suffered regardless. Somebody feels wronged. I hear you. I hear that. Like, I really, yeah. Like, wow, I would be just feel the same way. But there's another side of the story, and you have to, you know, take everything in consideration. Uh, so it's there's more, like, just like a bigger picture. So in the negotiation, I always tell the story where I was at a mediation or a settlement conference in federal court in Hartford, Connecticut, back in the '90s, and the judge, he made a comment. He says principles are a very nice thing to have until it gets in the way of reason. Like, that line sounds good. Uh, so uh, I went home and I told that to my wife, and she looked at me like I came from another planet. And she said, without principles, there is no reason. So I like that line too. And I always say there might be a line in the sand where, all right, like, I'm willing to compromise, but then it becomes about principle. And a third line I've used, I say principles are a very nice thing to have until it gets in the way of reality. So sometimes reality is, like, from my standpoint, we're going to have to spend all this money that I don't want to spend. Reality from their side is that it might take 3 years to get to a courtroom in an appeal, and they could lose. So there's all, what is the reality that we have to look at, and how can we both embrace the reality, which is not really perfect for either side, and we have to understand that, and we acknowledge, yeah, you have whatever, but, and yeah, I might have, there's a but. So
Yeah, and I've heard judges say, I really want to give you what you want, but the law does not allow me to do that. So, you're heard, and I agree with you, but you can't win this case.
yes, yes. So, like, I know my wife, uh, who's a therapist, gets like some business situation. I think I should sue them. It's like, look, the reality is, like, you don't have damages, or if you might, somebody will take your case, but it's going to go to the youngest associate who's not going to understand the issue, and it's not worth the frustration. Uh, so it's better to walk away from all of that, because that sort of kind of thing, like, you feel upset that somebody else caused you harm, and then you hire a lawyer, and that lawyer might not satisfy you. Now you're doubly angry and cranky and whatever. So it never really works out unless you really do have that kind of, where, yeah, it get the attention it deserves, because you have clearly wronged and you are clearly damaged, and so there's a clear line.
Right. Narcissists are very litigious, and they're always in contempt of court, which is really frustrating for somebody who was married to them They've gotten
Oh,
a divorce, and now they keep getting called back to court for this and that and this and that and this and that, and it's just crazy. And it may never stop. So the way to deal with that is to accept that you're dealing with a high conflict individual
mhm.
and that this is the way they operate, and not to get, because what will happen is every time they get that notice that, to come back to court for this or the ridiculous things, um, they get all worked up and it's like, oh, it's back, it's back, it's back. And I say to people, this is going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening. So just understand that this is the nature of this person, and that um, don't let it ruffle your feathers. You deal with the situations as they come up, but don't let that impact your life. Because when you do that, say you've been divorced for 10 years and that person's still running the show. You can't do that.
That is a tough situation. I don't deal with that, but what I do deal with, is usually it's all about money, and then like evaluate a case, and I've written an article, fighting fire with water. It's like litigation management, fighting fire with water, and I deal with attorneys who actually heard like attorneys, we have to fight fire with fire. Like, oh, that's really interesting. So I went to the firehouse and I said, like, I want to take up smoking. What kind of lighter fluid I use for, like, I want to smoke in bed, and what kind of lighter fluid do I use, and how many cigarettes, and what kind of matches do I need? And like I say, they actually said we use water to put out fires. I said, oh, who knew? And I always say water is crystal clear. It's clarity. It puts out the fire. And I always want to know, because I'm managing the litigation, what is our water? What is the water we have? Because a lot of times when you fight fire with fire, you might end up with more fire. So that's the way I look at it, which is maybe a little
Yeah,
different.
and that's really good. I like that. And for everybody that's listening, that's a really good way to think about this thing. What is your water? Uh, because what we know about people with narcissistic personality disorder is you never want to fight them in their own arena. You don't never go head to head with them because you will not win. So generally the water is strategy, going around the back of them, coming at them in a different way that they're not expecting. That's your water. But never approach them the way they approach you, because you'll lose every time. This is where their mastery is.
Yeah, like like I remember talking about like the law school thing, getting underneath people's skin, and I remember back in the '90s, I was at a conference in, it's just a face to face conference with this guy, and uh, I was like, he says, like, my job is to get underneath your skin. That's my job, and he was very good at it.
Hmm.
So you again, understanding, uh, it's like, you know when the punch is coming, you could deflect the punch, and this person is going to get underneath your skin, and to understand that, it makes it a little bit easier. Okay, this is what he's doing. So how do I react? I'm going to front. If I show him he got underneath my skin, I'm showing him he succeeded.
Hmm.
And uh, you have to do the opposite, where it's like, no, that.
That's not going to work, right? So what other kinds of soruses are there?
God, there's so many. Uh, there's I yeah, it's just it's there's so many different. Every time I
I think I copied something. I'm just trying to find it from your I copied something from your chat. Oh, here we go.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. What's the final straw, Crankosaurus?
The final straw, Crankasaurus, that's the one. So so in the first book, I wrote a chapter called the straw that broke the camel's back, Crankasaurus. And it was, and that was a funny story because there was these two brothers, Cain and Abel, and they had this camel named Camel, and and while Cain was out, Abel was it was hot, so he saw Abraham, and Abraham offered him a Pepsi, and he all gave him a straw, and while he was like, so he put the straw onto the camel while he's opening up the can of Pepsi, and the straw broke the camel's back. So, so Cain was all like, how they were fighting. How am I supposed to know this straw is going to break the camel's back? And that was a story of like being more resilient. You know, just like when you know the straw, and you know what straw is, and you could handle the straw. The final straw, Crankosaurus, actually was a story about Mr. Spock and Captain Kirk. So so the straw, that again, being resilient, and it just reminds me of another story that I had fun with. This is Crankosaurus menopause, where I combine different stories. So I have Seymour and Zelda getting married, and the priest says, "Seymour, do you take this woman Zelda to be for better or for worse?" And I go, Zelda, I had to convince her to marry me, and she gets very nervous. I don't want to put pressure on her. I'll take worse. And Zelda's asked the same question, and Zelda goes, well, when I said yes to Seymour, I was picking from the bottom of the barrel. And when I pick from the bottom of the barrel, you hope to get better. So I say better. And so Seymour gets upset. It's like, what do you mean bottom of the barrel? I want to change my answer. I want better too. And of course, Zelda gets all famished, and she says they were going out together. Like he would always sing, "Don't go changing, right, please. I love you just the way you are."
Right.
And he goes, bull crap. And he goes, well, can we do both? And the priest says, no, if you want better or worse, you need lots of lawyers. You have to negotiate what is considered to be better, what is considered worse. Let's say you think you got better, but Zelda says you got worse. And then you have to go into like all kinds of like legal proceedings, and it'll cost you hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they end up both picking worse. So again, it's about being resilient and just laughing. And they also pick sickness too. Just didn't want to go for like sickness to help forget that. So the whole thing is again about being resilient and understanding our, we're going to have those cranky moments. We're going to go have stuff. So again, to laugh at it, and I try to be very funny with it, and I think like the stories, kind of like stay with you afterwards, but it teaches you a lesson. So I do the Three Little Pigs, Inky, Pinky, and Stinky, and they were all at university, and it didn't turn out too well for Inky and Pinky. And then Stinky was in class, and the lecture was how to put lipstick on a pig. And Stinky was saying, "What is dumb? What would a pig need to put lipstick?" And Stinky started daydreaming and thinking about playing in the mud and the slop, and came up with the idea of bricks and build that went at home and built this brick house, which of course the wolf didn't, big bad wolf didn't do
Couldn't blow that down, right?
so that didn't work out too well.
Mhm.
So and then I have a story. Actually, the story is incorporated in my kids' book, Snoodles in Space, the Snoodle, the Zoodle, Cadoodles, One Happy Schmoodle, about these parents where they would always tell, like, their kids can do a simple task, and the father would say, well, the mother would say, it's not brain surgery, and the father would say, it's not rocket science. And the problem with that is like you didn't make your bed, it's not rocket science, or it's not brain surgery. And of course, if you're being told that you failed at the most simplest task, you're not encouraged to try anything more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And in that story, what happens, because they would use that phrase all the time, the Zoodles, the Zoodle Cadoodles from the planet Zoodle, they monitor the planet because their great leader, Cloodle the Grand Roodle, came down with genius brain, which is it's like athlete's foot, but fungus of the brain sort of thing. And he became a wackadoodle. So they heard it's not brain. So the problem on Zoodle, hundreds and hundreds of years before, they used to have lots of brain surgeons, but the brain surgeons would always poo-poo everybody. It's not brain surgery, or it's not rocket science. So they had no more brain surgeons left. So they abducted the parents, thinking that they must be brain surgeons and rocket scientists, but which they weren't.
Right.
So the good news was that their kids happened to be, their kids, Brianna Brainy Brutal, happened to know something. Well, their uncle also was a great brain surgeon. And then Ricky Rockadoodle, he learned from his other uncle rocket science. So they were able to go up into space with the prickly peppered purple propulsion powered pickle that you put in a noodle, which goes in. It was able.
Say that 3 times.
I said it a lot. It's prickly peppered purple propulsion.
Right.
And then even in my next kids book, again, it's about it's like an offset of crankiness. So my next book, which is coming out I think in a couple months, just has to get to the printers, but it's Snoodles in Space Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back. And that is a take on Willy Wonka. And if you remember Willy Wonka, like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, Charlie is the nice kid, but then there's these other kids who didn't end up too good. And the amazing thing about that was that there was a media frenzy. If you ever saw the first movie, like all the TV
Mm-hmm.
crew out there and the newspapers, it was the biggest event in town. Everybody was covering it. And I could imagine how they reported the kids who didn't turn out too well. So I take that and I flip it, and I end up making them the heroes, even though. So I have Frimpy Frumpy Fruital has the Fitsy Witsy Papa-Doodle. So first he fits, and then he wits, and then he popped. And Wimpy Whiny Woodle, she has the Swizzly Twizzly Slime-a-Doodle. And first she swizzled, and then she twizzled, and then she turned into a bucket of slime. They did have a de-slimer, it was good, but the kids were like, the newspapers had bad things. Like he thought, like her father was Mr. Grudelman, Grumpy Grimy Grudelman, and he thought, if you thought Grudelman was slimy, sort of thing. Like, it was terrible headlines, and the kids would make fun of them, and they turned out to be the heroes at the end of the story. And even in the story, you have they put dilly dally and willy nilly dust into the food, and they turned Brianna Brainy Brutal and Ricky Rockadoodle into willy nilly noodle and dilly doodle. And
I'm so confused.
so that's all about, it's just like, my book, like in that I have that piece in Cranky Superpowers. So I took that piece out, and that's about like oh yeah, like if 50% say the answer is B, but maybe that's the right answer. It's just like, they were very silly. So, but again, these other kids saved them, and they became heroes at the end. Which
Have you always been a storyteller?
uh,
It seems like it comes natural to you.
yeah, I see so many things that there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of, and even in Cranky Superpowers, I have this can't make this stuff up Crankatsuris
Mm-hmm.
chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I like to flip things. So like I have crazy stuff. I saw like, you can't believe what happened today. You can't make that stuff up. But I turn around where it's the same, it's actually the exact opposite where you say you can't make that stuff up. Oh, you woke up and you had a cup of coffee and then you sat in front of your computer all day working? Wow, you can't make that stuff up. That was what you did yesterday too, and the day before, and the day before that. The same old ruts, the Groundhog's Day sort. So I like that point of that chapter is like, hey, maybe making stuff up is creating, uh, doing things, taking action, as opposed to it's just the same thing, different day sort of thing. Which that is, you can't make that stuff up. No one's going to buy that book.
Right, that's interesting. Um, what level children's books do you write? For what age groups are your books?
Um, I think like 6 to 99,
Okay. All right, starts at 6. Okay.
about that.
Just curious. And the last thing I want to ask you about, I just love the way you insert Yiddish in this. I mean, I grew up around that, and so it's just funny. Every time I hear the words, it's just funny. But you talk about the Crankosaurus schlemiel.
Oh, I love the Crankatsuris schlemiel. There's a lot
So
of
just tell everybody what a schlemiel is, first of all, and then you
like
can
it's like a putz. It's like a loser. It's just sort of thing. And like and like there's a few chapters like he bought a chicken farm from Mr. Schmagegi, and there's no chickens.
go.
And there's one chapter, uh, first rodeo Crankatsuris, uh, and I had fun with that because again, it comes from being a lawyer, and you go into negotiation and some tough guy, oh, this ain't my first rodeo, and the thing is, they've never been to a rodeo. I'm in New York. There's no rodeo in New York. We're 1,000 miles away from the nearest rodeo. This guy knows nothing about rodeos. And the funny thing also about that, we never say the same thing about a circus. Hey, what are you doing this weekend? Yeah, taking the kids to the circus. Oh, you don't seem too excited. Ain't my first circus. So the thing, Mr. Schlemiel, because he's desperate, he sees the first rodeo competition, and of course he falls off right away and doesn't do well, and then he keeps going to the second and third, and he gets like broken legs and broke teeth knocked out, and concussions and arms broken, and by the 10th rodeo, they put him on the most toughest bull, and he stays on 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Like no bull rider ever stayed on that long. And everybody asked him, "Hey, how were you able to do that?" And he goes, "Ain't my first rodeo."
That's great. Oh my gosh, you're so funny.
So
Funny.
so the so the thing about that again, resilience, just kept getting back on the horse and
Or the bowl or whatever.
or the bull. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
hmm Yeah, 8 seconds is all you need, right? With bull riding. My husband's into bull. He likes to watch that. It's like 8 seconds.
8 seconds, yeah. No, Mr. Shamil did a lot better than that.
Yeah, that's a long time to stay on a bull.
Yes.
Unprecedented. So, well, anyway, it's been so fun talking to you. This is great. I love humor. It's really, really fun to talk about all this, and thanks for sharing all the books that you've done.
Sure.
And so I would imagine you have a website where all this, you explain all the books that you have, and
Yes, I have a website with an award-winning blog, which is on crankiness, and it's StephenJosephAuthor.com.
okay. And Stephen is Steven. Stephen.
And yes, Stephen with a V, StephenJosephAuthor.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. I
It
really
was a lot.
appreciate it. Yeah, it's good talking to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for being my guest today. I appreciate it. Take care.
Take care.
Okay, bye.